Well, Emirali is a political analyst and former aide to a UK cabinet minister. He joins me now by Skype from Hitchin in Hertfordshire here in England. Sir, thank you so much for joining us here on Al-Jazeera. The UK, unfortunately, has the highest number of COVID-related deaths in Europe, standing at around 128,000. Obviously, a lot of people had pointed the finger to the fact that this country locked down later than fellow European countries. So the testimony was shocking. How much of it were you surprised by?
Well, it was an astonishing piece of political theatre. Dominic Cummings was the right-hand man to the Prime Minister for practically a number of years until Boris Johnson became Prime Minister all the way back to the Brexit vote in 2016. So to see him turn on the Prime Minister in such a way was shocking. But I don't think it came as much of a surprise to a lot of people in Westminster who know Dominic Cummings as a maverick, as someone who doesn't play by the rules. In many ways, it was always inevitable that he wanted to set the story straight. And clearly his relationship with the Prime Minister has deteriorated, and he held no punches when it came to pointing out where he thinks the Prime Minister's failed.
So perhaps not a surprise to people in Westminster who observe the political side of things, but if you're one of the relatives of the tens of thousands of people who, according to Cummings, died needlessly, then how damaging is this for Boris Johnson?
I think it is damaging. As you say, for that quote, he said tens of thousands of people died who didn't need to. To hear that, if you're a relative of someone who's passed away, must be very difficult to swallow. And clearly there's been some questions raised about the Prime Minister's handling of the pandemic, particularly at the very beginning with the decision or decision not to lock down or to lock down perhaps a bit too late. But the Prime Minister has in his favour public sentiment, positive public sentiment, because of the vaccine programme. The rollout has been successful in the UK, and although there were difficulties at the beginning of the pandemic, and as you point out, the highest death rate in Europe, we've also got one of the highest vaccination rates in Europe now. So the Prime Minister is somewhat immune to criticism because of how well the vaccine rollout is going. But I'm sure this won't be the last we've heard of Dominic Cummings, and it may well pile more pressure on the Prime Minister.
Absolutely. I mean, 62 million doses of vaccine given in the UK. So obviously that is outstanding. But we're also hearing of a so-called Indian variant rampaging through the UK. And we know that Boris Johnson is still reluctant for another or a tightening of lockdowns. Do you think the lessons have been learned? When Cummings says, you know, the lesson is that if you delay, you will pay the price later. Do you think that lesson has been learned by Boris Johnson?
I think the lesson has been learned. At the beginning, when this pandemic first struck, the public gave politicians some leeway. This was unprecedented. There was no blueprint for how to handle a pandemic, and that's something that Dominic Cummings pointed out as a shortfall. But I do think as time's gone on, the government has adapted its strategy accordingly. And of course, there's different personnel in Downing Street right now, Cummings not being there, not driving the agenda, different people advising the Prime Minister. And I do think there has been changes to that strategy, but as you say, we aren't out of the woods yet, and there are difficulties potentially on the horizon. And let's hope the Prime Minister has learned those lessons that Dominic Cummings has clearly tried to give him today.
Emirali, political analyst and former UK cabinet minister's aide. Sir, thank you for sharing your views with us.
Thank you for having me.